Hi gang, part 2 of how did we come to have clone gays. Now, as I've said before in the last episode, Harry Hay, a very effeminate, cross-dressing gay man, had been very instrumental in starting a thing called the Mattachine Society. Now, as the Mattachine Society grew and it spread across the United States, things changed. And in the end, they actually got rid of Harry because he was much too effeminate. What happened was that there was a political understanding came to the fore, which was that the best thing that gay men could do was to hide in plain sight, right? And to that end, they said, right, what you have to do is you have to not be feminine. You have to be masculine, like the other guys, you know. There's no more of this flouncing around in dresses, you know, flicking your hair and doing all the rest of the stuff. That's got to stop. You have to act like guys, which, as I said in the last episode, for a lot of gays it's a very difficult thing to do because they actually suffer gender dysphoria. They want to be girly. You know, they are actually girly boys. And it's hard for them to be masculine. It's not natural for them to be masculine. The idea that sexuality and gender are somehow separated is a nonsense. It's a total nonsense. It's a convenient fiction which has been invented for political reasons. You can just disregard it because it's not true. Gay men are feminine. It's that simple. Oh, they might try and be masculine and all the rest of it, but trust me, we know better. So the accommodation, this movement towards appearing to be more like the rest of the guys in society is called the accommodationist movement, and it became very strong in the 1960s, especially at the time of the Vietnam War, because once again you had men being drafted up to fight, and again, well, this time in a war that they really didn't want to fight in, discovering their homosexuality in the forces, being demobbed. But they represented a new, what could we call this, a new resource, a new supply, fresh meat, you know, who could be trained into this new idea where you all had to be very guy-like, you know, no more of this feminine stuff. And the most feminine pen, Jim Furat, I've got this picture, Jim Furat, very, very feminine, very effeminate guy, has always been a strong accommodationist. You know, he's always tried to look and be as masculine as somebody like that possibly could be, which is not easy for them. If you like, you could encapsulate the accommodationist philosophy by saying that they're trying to put forward the idea that, you know, they're just like everybody else, but they love each other. You know, and that's actually being used as a slogan. You know, we are just like all the other men, but we just love each other. You know. So what's happened is that in the West, because this accommodationist gay movement has become very strong, it's the dominant movement amongst Western homosexuals. So, you know, inside that sort of bizarre LGBT so-called community, of which T should not be part anyway, inside the LGB, if you like, amongst the G-bit, the gays, the accommodations are absolutely dominant. You know, the feminine gays in the West have no space. They just don't. And I get regular emails and messages through my site from gay men who say, you know, it's terrible. Being a feminine gay man in the United States is just difficult. Might slightly better now, but certainly until very recently it was a very difficult thing to do. Not only would you be ostracised by the society, particularly if you lived in a small town, which was maybe a little bit more parochial, you were ostracised by the people you would have thought would support you, the other gays. It's like, no, you're too feminine. No, we don't want anything to do with it, because they attract attention. You see, they make you look obvious. You know, you've got this guy flouncing about, this flaming guy flouncing about all over the place, and don't do that. You'll make people look at us. That's what it's all about. That's basically what accommodationism is. You know, it's kind of hiding in plain sight. It's like a disguise, you know, a camouflage. And once the doors are shut and you're all locked up away, well, who the hell knows what goes on in places like that? But, you know, I don't think they're quite as masculine in private as they are in public. Let's put it that way. So that's where it's really come from. And by 2000, as I say, this movement, the accommodationist movement, was absolutely dominant in amongst the G of the LGB. They reacted, and they always have reacted, extremely badly towards HSTS, that's homosexual transsexuals. These men will always say that, they say terrible things. They say that, for example, that HSTS are cowards, that they're taking the easy way out. I mean, it's a lie, but because they're being girls instead of being strong and being gay men, which is nonsense. The ones who are seeking the easy way out are the gay men. They're the ones who are hiding what they actually are by pretending to be masculine. You know, HSTS are going, fuck you, I'm a girl. And you cannot accuse an HSTS of cowardice. It's the last thing you can do. They're some of the most courageous and nicest people I know are HSTS, because they'll stand up and say, no, I'm a girl. Fuck you, I am a girl. You know, and they won't be shouted down and they won't be turned back. And so there is a real tension between the G, you know, the gay and LGB, and that part of the T, the transsexual, transgender, whatever you like, such that an awful lot of HSTS that I know in the West, not so much in Asia, but in the West, they won't have anything to do with the LGBT. It's like, no, I'm not going near it. And there are two reasons. One is that it outs them. The first thing it does is that you're hanging about with the LGBT. Aha, you're obviously trans. And the second thing is they get such a hard time from the gays. You know, the gays are just intolerably rude to them because they think they're superior. You know, and it's not nice. I've seen it, and it's ugly. It's nasty. So this is really what you're looking at. When you look at the modern Western gay scene, you're seeing this invented form which didn't appear until the beginning of the 1960s. It became absolutely dominant throughout the 70s and 80s. And if anybody, as I say, if you remember the clone gay scene of the 70s and the 80s, early 80s, which was where all the guys were all very buff and macho, and you know, they wore the white t-shirts or the cigarettes and all that stuff. But it's all bullshit, you know. I actually, because I'm Scottish, now the scene in Scotland was very different. I was on the periphery of it because I was at art school, you know, the place is absolutely full of gays. I was there for the women, but hey. The gays there did tend to be very feminine, you know, extremely effeminate. The kind of people that I would have been certainly hanging about with on a daily basis then, which is in the early 1980s, would not be out of place in snowflake culture today. They just wouldn't, you know, multicoloured dyed hair. They tended to wear Doc Marten boots, incredibly tight jeans. I mean, how the hell do you get them on? And very, very flamboyant gay mannerisms. You did see the more quasi-masculine type, but most of them were the very girly type, extremely girly. They were flaming. And I think that's due to the fact that, as I say, these trends tend to start in the United States and they spread across the Atlantic. You know, so Scotland was a good bit further behind, although Scotland had a very strong gay scene, particularly in Edinburgh, where I was, as I've mentioned before. It was a much more relaxed and flamboyant. They were very girly. You know, it was absolutely normal for you'd find some gay guy sitting on your desk, you know, asking you for something, whatever it was, you know. Sitting on a desk with his legs crossed, you. Which was funny and hilarious, and it was good fun, you know. I was very fond of them. A lot of them. They were good guys, you know. They were girls. I mean, that's all they were. They were girls. What's actually happened now is that the accommodationists have all got old. And they're still dominant, but they're much older. So what they are now is these basically middle-aged masculine guys. And I've referred to them before as bankers with bad suits, you know. And this is what you get. You see these guys in relationships and they're like two peas in a pod, you know. They're just two guys, you know, and old middle-aged guys. And they've actually reverted back to the queens that we were talking about in the molly houses and before. They wouldn't look out of place, you know. You might have to dress them up and put a little bit of powder on them, but they would fit in absolutely. And to an extent, all their sort of faux masculinity has kind of fallen off with the years, you know, because it's an act. It's a way of protecting themselves in a society which was extremely homophobic. Now, you can't blame them for that. You know, I mean, we're talking about a time when gay men would be beaten up and maybe killed just for being gay in places like the United States. Quentin Crisp, actually, a very, very good book. It's called The Naked Civil Servant by a guy called Quentin Crisp. He's dead now. He was very effeminate, flaming gay. And he describes being beaten up. And, you know, some really, really bad things happened to him. And he describes them with good humour, which amazes me because I don't know I would be so good humoured about it. So you can't blame the accommodationists for doing what they did. What's basically to say, right, well, we're just going to hide all our femininity. That's going to be got rid of and suppressed. But it does cause a problem now that we have HSTS being a little bit more obvious. You know, for an awful long time, HSTS in the West were just invisible. They weren't there. I mean, they were there, but they weren't there. Because what would happen is that they would do whatever they needed to do to transition, have TRS, whatever, and then they would vanish. They would be gone. They called it woodworking. You know, that's it. They invent a complete new life, break off all contact with the past. They certainly wouldn't go anywhere near an organised LGBT group. Nobody knows how many of them there are. I know that there's an awful lot more than you think because I get messages from them. You know, people saying, I think your site is great and I think your channel is great. You're telling the truth. You know, so I know they're out there. But they're invisible and they are not going to come forward. They're going to hide because they're actually got good lives as women and they're not going to muck them up just to show solidarity with people who've been really horrible to them for a very long time. And at the same time, you've got the feminine gays, if they go down the line of trying to be masculine, by the time they're 30, it's hopeless for them. Ray Blanchard found that nearly all HSTS will transition by the age of 23, and transitioning later than that for an HSTS is extremely rare. And the reason is that they've gone past the point at which they can still easily look feminine and pass for a woman. I mean, they might still be small and delicate, but they'll look too masculine. You know, the masculinization of their bone structure and their face and everything else will have gone too far. And they feel that, no, they can't actually make the social cut. And remember, a lot of this with HSTS is about, it's social. HSTS sexuality is a very interesting mix. Women have a very socialized form of sexuality, okay? They are always thinking about social and political ramifications of sex and hierarchies and structures and, you know, how the control of sex will do things. You know, it's very complicated and very interesting. I mean, men just want to fuck, you know. HSTS are interesting because they have that, yeah, you know, they do want sex. You're never going to meet an HSTS who's not sexually motivated. Sorry. You just aren't. But at the same time, they're cognizant of the social ramifications of sex and gender in a way that men aren't. Men are kind of like bulls in china shops, you know. It's like, you know, we're guys, like, come on, you know. So HSTS sexuality kind of sits. It's partly masculine because they are target oriented. They do. They select males as targets and they pursue them. And having been the target myself, I can tell you they're bloody good at it. But at the same time, they're aware that their existence as women, their appearance as women, is part of a social cameo, if you like. And if they go beyond the point at which they can be convincingly female, or feminine rather, it's not going to work. It just isn't going to work. So they will, you know, somewhat unhappily usually go, okay, fine, the time for me has gone past and I will have to remain or be a gay man. And a lot of them get quite upset about it and they have gender dysphoria because they would rather be girls, you know. They just left it too late, and that's one of the consequences of having such a strongly accommodationist power base within the G movement. Remember that gays are always looking for new meat. And it's always like, well, let's get some new guys in. Because remember how we talked about, you had this situation where you have young guys, all right, and then old guys. I recommend you look at some gay porn sometime, you know, and you'll see exactly the same thing, that the targets of this, in many, very much large part, are young girly boys. You know, they're masculine, they're not HSTS, but they're extremely androgynous girly boys. And these are the target, they always have been the target of homosexual male desire. And so they're always, you know, come in, bring them in, bring more in, bring more in, you know, because we need them. Because they grow out of it. By the time they're 23, you know. So that's kind of what's going on here. Now, what's my own opinion? My own opinion is that I think it's unfortunate for gays that they feel that they have to go to these lengths to cover up their true natures. I mean, I spend a lot of time in the Philippines and they do not do that there. No, they don't. We'll talk about let's talk a little bit about the rest of the world.